Yeah, so I want to thank everybody for coming and showing up to this. Happy Geography Awareness Week. I sort of think that this is a great way to kick it off and really take an introspective on where CAMS is, how the workflow is going to go, and really get your input as users, as participants, as even people that just use the downstream data. To really get a better idea of, how we're going to move forward and how we're going to make the workflows work for you. Yeah, so I'd like to go ahead, introduce, here's the agenda. So we're going to do quick introductions. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the status of the CAMS modernization project. What are some of the deliverables that the consultants that I have on board are working on. And then we're going to dive into Esri's address data management solution and then talk about some of the workflows for integrating not only your data, but yeah. So, and then we'll get into questions and answers. So introduction. So using a grant funding that I was able to receive by the county, we were able to hire both Datamark and a company called OneSpatial. And the lead for the Datamark side is Jeff Ledbetter, and he was just talking about it. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick and your team that's going to be talking to?
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. Jeff Ledbetter here. I've met most, if not all of you, but good to be with you today. I brought with me a couple of technical specialists from our team to talk about the address data management solution a little bit later. April Kaiser and Becca Mangan. I just blanked there for a second, sorry. Becca Mangan. You'll be hearing from them a little bit later, specifically about the address management solution.
Perfect. And then Sheila, do you want to introduce your team that'll be talking real quick?
Sure. So I'm Sheila Stephenson. I'm the CEO for OneSpatial, and I'm joined by Melissa Ubaldo, who will be doing, I believe, the majority of the presentation. I know she's one of our excellent SEs. And then we have Brian Lynch, who's in charge of support for OneSpatial. And I think we have Ian on also, who is our project manager. And I'm sorry if I missed anybody. Oh, John Brady is also on, who's working on the project as well. I'm running through all the names real quick to see who all's on.
Awesome. And I'm glad to see that we have a wide variety of city representatives here and county. Thank you guys all for joining in. If you want, you can go ahead and change your name to what city you are so we could get a better idea, but that's okay. We could always cross-check later. Wink, wink. So far in the CAMS modernization project, we've been hosting these types of educational workshops to sort of, stimulate discussions, explain a little bit more about the realm of addressing and really what it impacts, the different use cases, different workflows, just to go and, get everybody on the same page about addressing. We also have discovery analysis, which is basically where we've been meeting with the various cities across the county to talk about their workflows, identify any challenges when it comes to addressing in general, and really get a better understanding of what you have to go through on a day-to-day basis regarding addressing. So that's been really enlightening. I know we've had almost a quarter of the cities interviewed. So it's been really eye-opening for that. And then one of the tasks that the consultants are doing is also reviewing and redesigning the technical infrastructure behind CAMS. So really what that means is the data integration, how the various cities are going to start incorporating their specific addressing into the county's addressing framework. And then they're going to go ahead and provide us a system design and real implementation plan of how we could start moving forward on a task-by-task basis to make sure that we're meeting all the needs, we're meeting all the use cases for this addressing data so that we could all move forward. Yeah, does anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay, cool. So I just wanted to go ahead and give a little review so far. So of the quarter, the cities that we've interviewed, this has been the breakdown. So we broke them up into 3 different categories just based on the interview, how they've explained to us their addressing process and their use of GIS in general. So we have, a fairly large amount of novice users, some that, their planning and public works departments didn't even know that the county was sort of interested in understanding about their address workflow, about how they assign and distribute addresses, didn't know that the county was working on this type of project for collecting addresses, and really don't currently actually have the staff to really fulfill or follow through in a project like this. And then we found, a large part, of course, intermediate and advanced users. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up was because we're going to provide, a potential solution for those novice and intermediate jurisdictions today. That it's not going to take them a large amount of effort or time to really build out a solution if we work collaboratively on it, because we could potentially, help provide this, this Esri address data management solution with certain key aspects in it that might ease the workflow for those smaller jurisdictions, those less staffed and less resourced jurisdictions, to be able to start contributing data into CAMS. I think that sort of covers it. Jeff, did you have anything else to add on that?
Nope, you covered it well.
All right. So now I'm going to toss it over to, I think, Jeff and his team to sort of talk about the Esri address data management solution. We were supposed to have Esri's address management team on today, but due to some scheduling conflicts, they weren't able to attend, but we do have them as a resource. So if we have any really technical questions or need any assistance building out any components that you guys can imagine or think of, we have them at our disposal as well. So Jeff, go ahead and take it over.
Yeah, great. And I'll point out that we did discuss with them about maybe at the next education session, having them do a deeper dive on this. So what you're going to get right now is really just a top level introduction to the address data management solution for ArcGIS Pro. And going back to what Rachel was talking about in terms of maturity, as you sort of view this introduction, and really we just want to kind of get your brains flowing on if this is a good solution for you potentially, if you need it or don't need it. As we get into the simulated workflow, start thinking about and start considering how you might be able to make not only this solution real, but the workflow that we're going to sort of show you as a simulated workflow, how you can really participate in it, and not just to the benefit of the county, but we're going to talk about how it benefits your use case as well at a city or data provider level. And so at this point, I want to bring in April Kaiser and Becca Mangan to talk through the details of this and introduce it to you.
Great. Hi, my name is April Kaiser, and I'm going to start today. And I apologize, my gardeners just arrived, so I hope it doesn't get too loud. I apologize.
It's the perfect time for a blower noise.
It always happens at the perfect time.
Yep.
Just like Jeff said, our goal today with talking about the ESRI's address data management solution is to introduce you to a solution that you can use to help maintain your data. And it's my goal is to wet your whistle or get you thinking about how you could use this solution with your own data. And we'll answer any questions that you have that we can answer, and then we'll have ESRI do a deeper dive. So the address data management solution is a solution that can be used to maintain an authoritative inventory of your road center lines and your addresses. And through a a tool set and through a deployment of capabilities, it can help you set up rules, attribute rules, and tasks to help you through the maintenance of your road center lines and your addresses. So it can assist with the maintenance of your road center lines and address points. It can help maintain your road names. It can do checking against your road center lines and your address points to make sure that certain information is consistent between the two. And then you can, through some of the tools that can be deployed, it will help you maintain your road intersections. And then finally, it will help validate your address integrity. So you can move on, Jeff. So some of the positives of the address data management solution, go ahead. Oh, sorry. There are attribute rules that you can configure and you can deploy within the solution. And these attribute rules are user-defined and customizable. So there are some rules that come with the solution, but you can define more rules and you can customize the rules that come with the solution. It allows for an enhanced editing. It'll help improve your data integrity. And really what I mean by that is through some of the rules that can be configured, it'll help auto-populate certain attributes. So that helps with your data integrity. So certain information is going to be populated when you put an address point down. On that same level, it can restrict invalid edits. So if you try to put an address range in that doesn't maybe make sense, maybe 1 to 1 million, 1 million probably isn't a valid address range. So it can help restrict those invalid edits. And then finally, it can perform quality assurance checks. So these rules, once set up, can help you go through these quality assurance checks to make sure that the information that you're adding, the requirements that you've set, all for the purpose really of meeting the goal of maintaining your addresses and road center lines. The solution comes with the rules and certain attributes that are the NENA national standard. So it helps you meet that NENA standard. And then it does just help with the general maintaining of your address and road center line data. All right, next slide, Jeff.
Actually, let me just toss in there that the point of this, and April introduced it very well, the point of thinking about using these rules is that, as you'll see when we get into the one spatial section, they're going to have attribute rules as well. And so if you can mirror both sets of attributes, you can really sort of prevent a lot of extra work, rework that you might get on the backside of the process, which we'll see later. You can prevent that from having to be done multiple times by using these attribute rules.
Yep, great point. So what do you get with the solution that you would download from Esri's, the address data management solution? So what you would get is a blank address data management schema that you can then field map and load your data into. You get an address data reviewer geodatabase, so it will help with those reviewer type checks. It comes with a Arcgis Pro template. So in the screenshot that you see on the screen, you'll see the address points are already symbolized. They're labeled. The road center lines have labeling on them. So you'll get that template. And once you deploy and load your data in, your data will also be able to use this same template. You get an ad data management toolbox. So certain tools that come with the solution will be available in the toolbox. There's also a Python tool set. You get a data dictionary to explain what each of the fields mean and some of the information that can go into the fields. Finally, instructions and certain tasks that will help you deploy the solution are also included in the solution and will help you step through the process. All right, next slide.
www.ci.azusa.ca.
And I'm going to pass it off to Becca now to talk about some of the deployment considerations.
Thanks, April. Hi, I'm Becca Manjan. Yeah, we're going to talk through some of these considerations with deploying the solution. So we understand that one of the hardest parts will be to get your data into the solution. So the first thing you're going to want to think about is doing a field mapping of your data to see how it maps to the pro solution schema. With the download of the ADM solution, there's a provided geodatabase with empty feature classes for you to load your data within. And because there are configured rules linked to these feature classes, the process is not just a straightforward data load. There are some additional steps you'll need to take in order to keep these rules set up. So in the task pane, which there's a screenshot here on the right side, there's a section called How to Configure Address Data Management, which it'll walk you in depth, through the process for that. So, there will be some considerations you'll need to think about with this. Meet minimum requirements prior to deployment. So there's going to be a minimum set of requirements for your data to load into the pro solution and be able to deploy the included attribute rules. So for example, if you don't have address ranges on your road center lines, then you won't be able to take advantage of the configured rules that use those ranges. So, I know there's a included splitting roads and auto-populating ranges. So if you have incomplete ranges, you're not gonna be able to, use that rule. Another consideration is to really start brainstorming where you think your data can benefit from the solution and these pre-configured rules. So where do you feel your data could use some cleaning or filling out that will utilize these configured rules best? Do you have incomplete address ranges within your center lines? Do you have a surplus of duplicate points? Those are just some things that you'd want to start thinking about and how the ADM solution will benefit you and your data. Because this solution is here to help make maintaining your data more manageable and to help you meet requirements for NG911 data standards. So, and yeah, if there are any questions with that, we can open a discussion. But those are just some things that I think with deploying this solution, you'd want to keep in mind.
Great, and I think you'll start to see as we proceed to the next step that this solution could provide a platform where you can do a lot of customization for your needs, as well as the considerations for the regional aggregation that Rachel's concerned about with CAMS, all at the same time improving your local workflows as well as collaborating with the county.
Okay, great. So there are some attribute rules that come with the solution. And like I mentioned earlier, you can also configure and customize the rules as well. So I wanted just to take a moment to describe the different rules that there are that you can work with and customize. It includes calculation rules, validation rules, constraint rules, and then these ready to use reviewer data reviewers. So the calculation rules are used to automatically populate attributes on a feature. So an example of this rule could be in your address points, when you populate the different parsed information of your address points. So you put in west for the pre-direction, main for your street name, and then street for your post type. Well, you might have a need in your data that you want it to be concatenated into one field for maybe other purposes that you have with your data. Rule could be configured to look at the different parsed street informations and then calculate a full address field with all of that street information. So that's just an example of how you could use those calculation rules. All right, validation rules They specify permitted attribute configurations and relationships on a feature. So an example of a validation rule could be for your address ranges, for example. Maybe you only want your users to input valid address ranges starting at 1, maybe the maximum range at 9999. So you could put that address range, that range into that validation, and it would only allow your users to be able to enter address ranges that meet that requirement. Again, it really helps with data entry, and it sort of does the QC on the fly up front, and allows your users only to enter certain information. All right, another rule, which is the constraint rules. They allow users to specify permissible attribute configurations onto a feature. So some examples of this one might be where you have certain constraints in a certain field. For example, if you want all your road names to only be entered as uppercase, you could configure this rule to do that. Or if you only want a certain number of characters in a field, if you want to restrict that, you could also use this rule for that. And then another thing to keep in mind for the constraint rule is, for example, if you have a field where you enter certain information, and based on the information that's entered into that field, you wanted to restrict other values in other fields, you can do that with this rule. And then finally, there's the data reviewer or the ready to use tools. And that's just another type of validation that the solution includes. So if you move on to the next slide, Jeff, I just wanted to give you an overview of what this might look like in the solution. Basically, each of your feature classes, your site address points, your road center line, the ability to be designed and rules be configured on them. You'll notice on the left-hand side in my table of contents, I'm clicking on my address points, I'm designing those attribute rules. My attribute rules, the different ones, will be located across the top in that ribbon to let me know which type of rules that I can configure. So that's where my calculation, my constraint validation rules will live. And then as you can see, as I click on the different rules and I add new ones, that's where I can start configuring there on my right-hand side. So I just wanted to give you a taste of what that may look like in the actual application. And then I think I have one more slide. This was address points. I do have one more slide, what my road center lines may look like. Very similar. I have my rules across the top, and I have my pre-loaded rules that have already been entered, and then I can add more if I need to. Are there any questions?
I just wanted to mention that, you know, a lot of this build out we could do as a group using the LA County available data. So like we could pre-configure it so that it pre-populates the city boundary information, the CSA boundaries, the county statistical area boundary names for the unincorporated areas, getting the count of, you know, how many other addresses are within that parcel, getting the APN number, all these types of rules we could pre-configure so that you guys don't necessarily have to. And if you guys have any other suggestions of how this might be able to be used as well, we want to hear it. Like I know within the county ourselves, we want to get specifically for the assessor parcels, work on that integration a little bit more to ensure that, you know, an address point's attached to an APN number so that when we're doing other queries or other associations, we have that already integrated within the data set. Some other things to consider are your editing boundaries that, you know, if you divide your staff by adding addresses based on a certain geographic region, we could design the rule in there that limits the editing for that specific user to that specific area. So I know that comes in handy with various other jurisdictions that do addressing for other jurisdictions, just not to be limited to their own city, but be able to add in that customization to address for another city jurisdiction.
Yeah, I think, Rachel, you really would love to sort of cultivate a conversation among this group. You know, having seen this, the different types of rules, and not only the ones that are provided, you know, in the stock package, but what do you guys see as possibilities for these validations? Feel free to, you know, bring yourself off of mute and let's have a collaborative conversation about it. And if you don't feel like doing that today in this large of a group, these discovery sessions that we've had have certainly been geared at good conversation points. And if we have more of those, I think one of our recommendations will be in that system implementation plan is to host some regional, you know, validation rule crafting sessions. But we really want to make sure that you guys start, you know, moving the gears in terms of thinking about what are the types of constraints you want to put in validations and concatenations that you can use out of these packages to help you at a local level. That'll also make it easier when you submit up to the CAMS database.
Yeah, I know something that I've been thinking about for public safety would be to integrate those types of jurisdiction boundaries designations into the data set. So we know that there's compliance between who's the public safety answering point for a given address, for a given road segment, so that we could go and get that duplicity, understand both of those.
Yeah.
And then also have it so that if a new subdivision's coming in with a certain subdivision name, you know how they call, like, you know, little new developments, Ridgeway something, but that's not part of the address. It's not part of the road names. That's just what that specific community is called, but that's not really saved anywhere in GIS world. So when the public safety, you know, users are looking at evacuations or certain things like that, they use those community names that aren't anywhere in GIS to designate it. So if we could have, you know, some sort of, you know, auxiliary community, you know, development name, I think that might be helpful to certain users on our investigations to take into consideration.
Yeah, I bet that's especially going to be useful in subdivisions that are not part of a city as well.
Yeah, this is Nick from LA County. Yeah, on that point too, evacuations usually go by subdivisions, by that community name, whether it's a gated community or not. People know those names and they're familiar with them, and we don't really have a way to track them. So if there is some way to track them in this or in some auxiliary or parallel layer, then we should think about it.
Yeah, right. And then even the modifications of city boundary name or city boundaries, right? Sometimes there's annexations or the opposite of annexations.
De-annexations, maybe?
Yeah. that
we
change.
have to keep that layer up to date. Whatever layer we use for that, we'll have to make sure that it's a live layer working with LA County Public Works that manages the annexations and de-annexations layers.
Yeah, and we could set on here, you know, a trigger for a validation to run every so often to ensure that the city boundaries associate with that given city name at a regular interval. So we know that, hey, you know, there was a change, we could move forward, you know, with modifying those addresses, those those city jurisdictions, those postal communities even, along with those changes. Can you guys think of any other situations that might warrant it? No, is it all too early in the morning for you guys?
Can't find the mute, unmute quick enough.
I'm gonna leave the awkward silence going if you guys want.
Yeah, Rachel, I was gonna say this, Mark. I think if we look at the existing CAMS data set with all the relevant fields that are attached to it, we can identify a series of polygons that would be overlaid potentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know in some of the discovery sessions, there was also talk about, potentially even getting a building count, for the parcel or for the address. Say there's, 4 buildings on a parcel that only has one address, maybe getting that count in there.
Yeah, potentially. There's one that actually, I don't know if our LA County Fire Department is on this call, but I was thinking about this the other day. They have dispatching areas, that maybe we should add into CAMS. For example, I think kind of a strange one, but they need, and I don't know how and when you want to do that, but we potentially would want to add like the rivers, like the LA River, for example, and they will actually split their dispatch areas at rivers, not just at streets. I mean, it's something that we've dealt with a lot. Just something to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, by the way, I don't think you have anybody from LA County Fire here. I know you have LA City Fire here and a couple people from some of the 911 groups who are familiar with fire stuff. But I don't think you have any LA County Fire from the names I'm seeing.
So, question for you, Rachel. I mean, in terms of working, the collaborative approach with cities, I know I was out for a little bit, but did you discuss how, or what would be a architecture for the sharing of the information? Or is the plan that cities update their information locally and then it gets pushed to the server, which I think you're putting in the cloud somewhere? Okay.
That's a great segue, Mark. Thank you.
Okay.
Pay you the $5 later.
That's right. That's right. It's the logical next question, right? Okay. So we work on it in our desktop environment and we've come up with some sort of mutually beneficial rules that we can use in this solution if we are to go that route. How do we interact with the solution? What would the workflow look like? And so that's exactly what we wanted to start your mind thinking about as well. And there's going to be a couple of perspectives. And the first perspective is that of the data providers. In the green square here, you'll see the fact is that you don't have to use the address data management solution on Pro because your organization may not have deployed Pro. Going back to those levels of maturity, if you're in that advanced level of maturity and you've got a lot of solutions built around ArcGIS Desktop and built around integration of this database on your local enterprise system into other applications, and your schema is pretty set, you're going to have a whole different list of things to consider than somebody who is maybe in that novice category that can go straight into Pro, just adopt the ADM solution as a track to run on and move forward from there. So we wanted to be sure that in the green square, we signaled to everybody that no matter what level of maturity you're at, no matter what your technology stack is, no matter what your configuration is, that you have a role to play here, and that as long as what we'll define as regional addressing recommendations coming out of this project will include these common schema framework that we're talking about here today. Some of it will come from solutions, some of it will come from CAMS itself, some of it will come from 911 schemas, and some of it will come from, maybe some LA County internal needs as well. But we'll have for you coming out of this project addressing recommendations, and part of it will be common schema framework that you'll want to do a thoughtful interpretation of. How do I get that into my schema? How do I get that into my technology stack? How do I get that into my data configuration such that I can participate in this and still work with the systems that are deployed and the dependencies that exist in your local scenario? And what that workflow will look like is whatever output you have, whatever stack you have, you put out a file geodatabase, you put out a shape file, et cetera. And here in a second, we're going to have one spatial talk about on the backside what the processing looks like, and they'll be able to give you any constraints necessary around data format or schema or other things like that. But you'll take that export data, maybe you'll want to submit even, Sheila, you and your team are going to have to tell if this is a possibility, but even like a map package might be an option. You submit that to CAMS, and at this point, we'll kind of look at that CAMS interface, and I'll just pass it over to you, Sheila, Ian, Melissa, whomever it is.
Yeah. Melissa, are you picking it up? And are you on mute?
Double muted, always gets me.
Yes.
I am trying to share my screen, but it's not letting me. I think, Jeff, you have to,
Yep.
Thank you.
Stop here. Oops. Stop the share. There you go. Let me find you in the list. Sorry. Okay, good. It's working.
All right. Who wants to start? Ian, did you have any words? Should I just jump right into it?
I think we're all happy for you to just take it away, Melissa.
All right. So this is something that was already seen last time, but I'm more than happy to reintroduce One Data Gateway as well. And this is a solution that Jeff just mentioned. So just to remind everybody what One Data Gateway is, or as a refresher, it is a self-service web portal that has one integrated rules engine under the hood. And what it does is it provides an environment to share multiple validation and enhancement processes between internal and external users. So in this case, that would be LA County, as well as any other CAMS data contributors. So just a quick animation here to show you what that means for everybody on this call. So to facilitate CAMS data contributors' data submission, LA County would host these rules on their server. So all contributors would have to do would be upload their data to One Data Gateway, where it goes through a series of data validation rules. These could be your NINA rules, your addressing rules, and all that good stuff. If there are any issues found, contributors can download those results. And what that does is it really gives them that opportunity to correct any of the errors that were found during this data validation process. So once they've gone ahead and made those corrections, they can go ahead and resubmit that to run it against the same data validation rules. So if the quality is eventually at 100% conformance to those rules, one of the things that LA County can actually include in this setup is to have that clean data automatically delivered to their server. And essentially what that does is automates the data supply chain. But for the actual implementation that we'd like to set up for you guys is there would actually be two separate processes or workflows within One Data Gateway. So step one would be what I just described in the animation. Our data providers would submit their data to run them against the data validation rules. The results can be utilized to make any necessary corrections, any kind of exceptions, and then go ahead and resubmit that. So now once those data once that data passes these validations, the data providers can submit it through the next step, which would be the to run that CAMS data through One Data Gateway's data submission or change detection process. So what this does, it actually compares it to the previous submission of the CAMS data by that same contributor, and it tries to detect any deltas between the two. So we go ahead and then update to the submitter's previous submission for that. The result of that process is change proposals, which are proposals that indicate how these two different data sets interact. Do we have any changes in our geometry? Do we have any sort of changes in our attributes? So on and so forth. So then those proposals are then pushed over to the to LA County CAMS. That step then is where these proposals are then reviewed and then utilized to update LA County CAMS on their side of the process. So I do have a live demo in here, and what we're actually going to see is the actual environment that we've set up for LA. I guess this image that I just stole from the internet, it's under copy. There might be some copyright issues with that, but I just wanted a nice example just for this particular demonstration. So once I go ahead and log in to Data Gateway, I can see which processes are available for me to run. I'm going to go ahead and go to my assignments. And what we set up for this, I don't know if this is actually how we want it to be, but we have separate processes for address points. We have separate one for road center line, separate one for PSAPs, etc. So let's go ahead and select this one. This checks our address NINA validations. This is for our site structure address points. And let's go ahead and make that submission. So just say start submission, and it's just looking for my CAMS data right here. So what I'm going to submit is a sample video that was shared with us, I think last week. So this is definitely not in the NINA standard GIS data model for NINA. So in here, what we've set up here, this is a submitted data set. And actually what was containing within that Whittier is a class called address_PTS and a class called street center lines. So like I said, we submitted two, but it really only requires one. So in here, what we've done here is set up our address points to be submitted as site structure address points. And in here, this is where we can make our customization. We try to fit as much as possible which attributes can be mapped over correctly. So in here, we pushed our city attribute to be the incorporated municipality. For our address information, the street direction or the pre-directional, the street name or address number, and all that good stuff. The thing is also, though, it's telling you that you have 35 unmapped target attributes because, of course, the schema for site structure address points is way more extensive than what you're seeing in here. But what we're doing here is we're submitting what we have, right? We're just mapping over what we have. And the reason why I'm not going through and, assigning these, as you saw when I actually submitted that, it tried to map over as much as possible, what it can map over to the other side of the schema. And that's because actually when I first ran this, I went up to manage the schema mapping, and I've already saved that I've only had to do this step once and went ahead and said, save that mapping so that next time I submit the same data set, it will just automatically adhere to that customization of that schema mapping that I've created. So it says here that 28.57% of that was actually mapped. So let's go ahead and close this one. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit continue. It will warn you again, you do have 35 target on unmapped attributes. We're just going to go ahead and hit continue. So we're seeing here that we actually have two open. Let me make this a little bigger. I'm not sure how well that's reading. So we do have two open data tasks in here, even though we just submitted one data set, right? So what we're doing here is actually after submitting our Whittier data, the next one automatically taps into some tables where we have valid values for our counties, valid values for our states, and valid values for our countries. So these are tables that we're going to check against some of our attributes here. And I believe county, state, and country, or county and country at least, they are part of the mandatory attribute checks per the NINA standard. And we've actually gone ahead and lumped these three different attribute checks or attribute validations according to that. So the mandatory ones are up here, conditional ones, and the optional ones. So it's not going to let me actually take a look at what's nested under here until it actually finishes running. So let's go ahead and wait for that to run a little more. What I want to show you though is while you're waiting, and we are going to wait for that to finish. I've gone ahead and kind of set up an information page here. So if there are some people, the novice ones particularly, who might need some help in trying to understand how to get their data Next-Gen 911 ready, I went ahead and linked the documentation that's available online for everybody to look at for the NINA standard for NG911 GS data. And obviously this is going to just link me to that page right here. You can double check, oh wait, what are those, mandatory ones? What are these conditional ones? What are the optional ones, and so on and so forth. So just a quick review if for some reason you need help for that in that department. So let's go back here. Oh, I also have a submissions tab in here. It's still running. We're going to see here that it's actually still running. Yep. The guy is still running right there. This just gives you kind of like a quick history of how many times we've been submitting our data. It logs each time you make that submission. And the dashboard also shows you a history of that information that you've sent out. So we haven't really made that many submissions. And I have canceled some. I was the culprit here for those testings here because I made a mistake. But that's on my part. So let me go ahead and go back to my current submission. Hopefully we already have one of these out. So far, does anybody have any questions about getting to this step as far as, just the data submission and how do I know if I actually am submitting correctly?
I guess we can take silence as a no.
I guess so. Well, yeah. This will.
I just had a quick question. My assumption is that Rachel, the idea here is that this would be designed for cities and agencies that are not using there would not be a direct connection into a CAMS database, right? This would come in from an external source in effect.
Yeah, so this would be the external people that say they don't want to use, the CAMS schema. They don't have access to the databases, those types of things that want to just do it on their own, would be able just to submit their data through here, quality check it, run reviews on it, and then have it submitted into the CAMS framework through this portal, essentially. So it'll give us a tracking mechanism as well as be able to identify the non-conforming data and why that's non-conforming, and be able to have us, make the decision on whether to integrate it or not. Okay. As we do the change detection, if there's, 5 new addresses or something like that, but they, fail 95% of the tests, then we could say, oh, okay, let's have a conversation about this and talk about it before we actually add those in.
Gotcha.
All right, so it looks like our process has finished running, but I want to take a look at the information that you can already pull from just this run right here. So don't be alarmed. It does say 0 for the 32,332 site structure address points that I submitted. That does not mean that I actually failed all of these checks, but I do want to show you here where we do have that information. So it runs by conformance. That's what you're seeing as a result. So if it's not 100% conformance, it means you have non-conforming features in there. So definitely we didn't have anything pass for our country, our county, our ID and site and GUID in this case, I've already checked this actually. The only reason why these are all invalid was because we actually didn't make a submission for this specific attribute. It didn't exist in the submitted Whittier data for this example, which is why you're seeing it's either all of it passed or all of it failed. But so far so good for the ones that for the attributes that we do have information for. So that's for the mandatory. Let's take a look at the conditional ones where we do have all of our features pass, which means all the information that we did have in here. It's either, again, just pass or fail. But what I do want to show you here is where you might see things that you might actually have to go in and try to correct. So in here, it says 99.98 here. We only have a handful of nonconformances says here where the building attribute does not match up. And for this case, what we used, I think, for the building attribute was unit name. So we can check that out in a second. Also for latitude and longitude, we also just have a handful for that. These checks just say that the latitude and the longitude can't be null. So we're gonna go ahead and check out those as well. And we also had an issue with a postcode. And again, it's because I don't think I made a submission for the postcode, I think, which is why everything actually in here failed. So after seeing that, oh, sorry, last step right here, the tail end, it automatically does an export of a markup class, things that can actually help you navigate to the features that have failed at least one rule. So in here, we're seeing 161,682 markup points. And what that means is obviously we only submitted about 33,000 approximately. So definitely we do have address points in there that have failed more than one rule. So what we want to do is go ahead and export that. I'm just going to go ahead and hit continue. And at the top right here, you'll get some submission data here in a second. It tells you that it took us about 4 minutes to run through everything, all of these checks all together. You can go ahead and download another copy of the input you submitted. You can also download that output or the export that we just looked at. So this is going to be your file that actually has those markup layers in it. But do want to show you again, for those who might have missed it last time, it does give you some information about your submission. So what I really like about this is it gives you these ready-made metrics for your submission. Essentially what we just saw on that page, how many did I submit? Which attributes in here that I actually did poorly on, if it had any non-conformances and all that good stuff. It does list down everything up until how many markups were created. So it's nice if you need to keep this in your organization, some metrics to look back on or just to keep as a record for every submission. Okay, so I went ahead and pulled in because this instance does not have, this environment doesn't have ArcGIS Pro. So let me switch over to mine, where I've actually already pulled in the Whittier example or the sample data that we had for Whittier. I did have my address points in there, my street center line. So this is the markup point class in there, and we're going to see everything turn green. And again, that's because of our country and our county not having submitted any information in there. So we can obviously, for people who might not be SGIS savvy, there are different ways for you to actually oh, I didn't mean to go to display. I want to go symbology to kind of try to figure out which address points failed what rule. And we are actually going to see that in the violation tab where it actually shows you which rule does. But what I want to show you is I've already pre-made some of these queries. So this is where, you know, we can narrow down which ones failed our country, county checks, IDs, etc. But let's go ahead and take a look at the one where we failed the latitude check. So we should just have like a few in here. There we go, we're seeing them popping. Let's go ahead and actually zoom in here. Taking a second to render. All right, so it looks like all of these guys are here, this row of address points. And what we're seeing, the information that we're seeing on that bookmark is number one, oh, let me move it out here. Which class I'm actually pointing at, the feature ID, The comment, which basically gives me in a nice sentence, the latitude is invalid. And the rule is actually the one for site address point, again, checking for the latitude. So let me go ahead and actually take a look at one of these. And if we take a look at our address point here real quick, our lat and long is actually null. So if I also turn on the longitude in here, it's going to show up as non-conformance. So let's take a look at the one that actually didn't fail, just to show you that we did have conforming information in here. They are, in fact, supposed to be populated in there. So it's a pretty straightforward way of being driven to the actual pieces of data. That failure rule indicates to how or why it failed. If for some reason you need help trying to figure out, if you're trying to figure out why it actually failed a rule, but you can't quite understand it, we can definitely speak with LA County's folks and say, well, this is the way that the rule has been written per the NINA standard, and then we can we can of course like help each other out in trying to understand the quality standard that we're trying to set here. So that's pretty much my demo. Let me go back and does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
One question that somebody just chatted to me because I'm the meeting admin, I think, was about individual PSAPs needing to log into the system to submit the data. And one thought that was going through my head was this part of what you showed as a process is kind of like a setup. And then after that, it should be more straightforward. Could you kind of speak to that component? And if I've misunderstood that, correct me, please.
Are you on mute, Melissa?
No, I'm not. I was trying to figure out if, is this a question that's
well, I think I can answer. I think,
okay.
Yeah, I think I understand what they're after is. So she showed, you know, doing some schema mapping at the initial stage. And so they're set up, and you're right. Basically what happens is once that is done the first time, then it remembers it the next time you submit. And unless you've had any changes to your schema, you're just able to submit automatically. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and that was the point that I wanted to make sure that I understood correctly, and that Esther understands, is that a little bit of what you saw there is a one-time effort, and after that, it's basically just an upload and an execution of the validations,
exactly.
Right?
And you get the response back, you get the results back. Yep, That's it exactly.
And then her question specifically spoke of PSAPs, and I think this is one for you, Rachel. I think of it more of GIS data providers doing that. However, in some cases, the PSAP may be the GIS data provider. And then in that case, the PSAP would need to go through that process themselves, right, Rachel?
Yeah, and I don't think, you know, we have a restriction of the PSAP doing that. We just want, you know, the GIS professional, or at least have the expertise of a GIS professional available to that jurisdiction to be able to understand what the outputs are and where it's going, and whether they want to, you know, make the updates required for it. Because it is going to be a large overhaul if, you know, we all start, or if, you know, the city starts submitting their data and then getting the export out of, okay, this is what's wrong, now what? You know, that's going to be a large overhead for a PSAP to handle. Yep. Unless they get some, you know, direct GIS capabilities in there.
Yeah, and I think each individual data provider, be it a PSAP or a Public Works Department or a GIS in the IT, is going to have to look at what are the roles and responsibilities of their sort of iterative data quality improvement process going to look like. Who's going to upload that and run the validations? Who's going to get the validations back and adjust the data? Who's going to have the role of approving those changes, making sure that they meet the PSAP's needs and any other business needs. So every local jurisdiction that has a GIS data provider, are going to have a lot of things to think through about their own business processes in order to be ready to, you know, submit and participate in this CAMS process.
Yeah, and I just had a private question. I'm not going to call out who submitted it, But you know, on the public safety side, there's some back and forth on, you know, well, who's primary, who's secondary, you know, around the PSAPs, and also the you know, the data authority. And for me and this process, it's who submit or who assigns the addresses is really what I'm trying to target here. It doesn't matter who's answering calls, who's sending people to calls. If the data's the data, then it should all be intertwined and linked. It should be our unifying factor aside from who's doing what where. If we get those workflows down, if we get those lines of communication built and developed out within your jurisdictions, then it shouldn't matter who's who and who's what.
And that's a great example of what I'm referring to as a GIS data provider. In some cases, if you're a consolidated PSAP that you're dispatching for more than one city or more than one entity, you may have multiple GIS data providers that you're getting data from. You'll have to figure out that relationship and communication like Rachel just spoke to, and then they'll also have to figure out the communication back to CAMS, right? So their submissions get to CAMS, and then we'll talk about in a second, what are the outcomes of this process that we're talking about now? That use case of being a consolidated PSAP is a really good example of some of the outcomes that are vastly improved over kind of the status quo coming out of this effort.
Yeah, and I mean, it could always fall back into those attribute rules, right? Mm-hmm. Back in the editing workflows and all those sorts of things that we can limit it. We can flag something as, you know, needs city authorization or something like that. Say if the PSAP wants to add, you know, 1,000 potentially not legal addresses, but the public works departments are like, hey, that's not a legal address. You know, we could work on that, you know, using the databases, using the flags and constraints of the database itself to identify those and really resolve them on a workflow.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example of the use of the rules that we were getting at, you know, when April and Becca were talking, of where if you want to set up some flags in your schema that tell you that it's been approved or that it is for CAMS or not for CAMS, that's a great sort of validation rule to set up on both the desktop side in ArcGIS Pro and the solution, and in your one spatial products that we're seeing here, where it doesn't make it to the CAMS if it doesn't have that flag, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions, comments, thoughts, feelings? You know, this is your time to, you know, talk about your specific case and how you could potentially see this working, whether you would want to use, you know, the Esri address data management solution as a base. So we could have, you know, some of these pre-configured rules that are in the data gateway already written within the address data management solution, so that you're not having to go back and forth and quality check back and forth, but you could have a general understanding that, okay, if I enter my data into the Esri address data management solution, I know it's going to pass the data gateway data validation rules.
And I think
question.
Rachel, sorry.
This is Nick.
Go ahead, Nick.
I have a question. Are we going to discuss, or are we going to have a rule? Are we going to, maybe cities will have it and unincorporated can be different, a rule that an address should be on a building, within a building polygon? And maybe it doesn't have to be, because you can have an address for a parcel that doesn't have a building, but for those parcels that do have buildings, to put that address there and have rules that validate it so that we move some address points to closer to their location, which would probably help some public safety folks anyway. But that's something that I think we got to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want the input of some cities here. Would that be something that you guys want? I know, I believe the city of Whittier went through that process and moved a majority of their cities onto the building outlines. Would other cities be interested in having some sort of automated, okay, let's see what this might look like, and then incorporate it back into your own data? Does anybody say no, I guess is the best way to do it.
I was going to say that's usually a yes that we hear, but
Kayla chatted absolutely.
There you go.
Because, you know, being with the county and being, you know, a repository of sorts, I have access to, you know, the LARIAC building outlines. We could, you know, pre-configure it so that it'll just query against it, so that you don't necessarily have to be a LARIAC member to have access to that, but it could query it and tell you yes or no whether it's in there, and then actually move it to it. So then when you export out your address points, you could have it within the building outline. You know, given some caveats of the building size, whether there's 1 or 2 buildings, whether it goes to the bigger building, those types of things would need to be discussed and, you know, worked out, but all right. Is there any other, go ahead.
You got some positives in the chat on that as well.
Cool. Is there anything else you guys can consider or think of that might help your overall workflows or your integrations within your city processes or workflows? You know, we're shooting for the moon here, so nothing's too obtuse or, you know, off the wall. We want to hear it. Because while I still have the consultants on board, I want to be able to build out anything you guys want.
That's a really good point, Rachel, that, you know, you shouldn't confine your thinking to schema or confine your thinking to like what you need to do to submit the data, but really open up the possibility of where these validation rules could help you, even if, and I would say, you can correct me if this isn't what you intend, Rachel, but I would say even if there's something that you feel like is peculiar to your city, but you think there could be a validation rule for it, I think you'd be open to making it a validation that's available.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I was going to give an example, but I'll leave it alone.
Hi, Rachel. Sorry.
Is that you, Todd?
This is Todd from the regional planning at the county. I'm a little curious in regards to the discussion that's been going on a little bit here about the center lines and the actual streets. Essentially, we're talking about 2 different data sets here, and I'm curious if the center lines were originally imported into CAMS and they had the address information added to it, because we're not talking about the same thing here.
So Todd, this is Mark Renninger. In terms of the street center lines, like where was the source of those and the addresses that are along those streets? Is that what you're asking about?
Yes, because if that's what's in CAMS, we're not talking about the same deal here, because we're talking about roads versus center lines. Center lines are different, right?
Well, there's legal center lines, and basically the source of the data in CAMS, I believe, is Tiger.
Okay.
With all of the...
We're talking about roads, Todd, for your things. Yeah, we're not talking about center lines for a definition from Public Works, and sometimes planners need they need to know the exact center of a street, because then setbacks go from that. And so a road designation that's off 5 or 10 feet from the center, even though it's a graphical representation, it doesn't work for some things that we have. But I think, Todd, we're talking more here we might say center lines, but we're talking about roads. We're talking about road segments that we're using to represent address street ranges and address ranges and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there's one validation that I think might be potentially useful. I think Mark Sasseni was showing it to us last week, and this would be a massive one, which is to make sure that the streets, and because most of these street center lines are related to addressing, that they're digitized in the same direction as the house numbering grid.
Yeah.
Which may be fairly complex, but because we have, I think, over 30 house numbering systems, each with a center point, but they could probably be digitized. They may already exist somewhere, so that within those areas, all streets that are, that are quote unquote north are actually digitized from south to north and vice versa from south, when you're in the south section, and then east-west roads are digitized. The direction is correct.
So that's definitely a check that the software is capable of. But Rachel, is that something on your radar?
It is now. No, definitely. Yeah, we could work on, getting something like that for the solution, and, processing wise, I don't think it'd be that difficult to do. It would just be getting it digital so that it could do the quality check against it to ensure that.
Yeah, note that, there's another check that there are certain types of addresses, for example, utility addresses that we have that are not in parcels and not in building outlines, just to think about that. So not all of those are failures or errors.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
One of the other things that we saw with Tiger, and I'm not sure if this again can be automatically fixed, is that if you have a double line street, so one of the larger street segments, the way Tiger tended to attribute that was to only attribute one of the street lines, where that's kind of an incorrect function, right? It should be the right side of, like the right address on the street, and then the left address on the other street. On the other street.
Normally done where there's a center divider, but not always.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like in a dispatch system,
Right,
that's really important to maintain those turn restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really
look at some samples. Just go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, we just need to take a look at the use cases of how people would use that street segment data and what's the best benefit for everyone, whether it be the, central or split, and take that into account. Yeah, so we have another great question here about stacked addresses. And Sheila, I don't know if you'd be the person to be able to answer this.
Let me see what the question is.
You said, how would this affect stacked addresses? Would it be possible to unstack them and keep them within the building footprint?
So Melissa, do you have some thoughts on that? I know we've played around with stacked addresses, but
yeah, we've definitely done something for that for a different client. So one of the things that we did do was try to spread them out in a particular order so that none of them are stacked or too close to one another. And again, just restricting that within within the actual bounds of that building outline. I think one of the tools that we use for that is you can absolutely build a rule that would actually build that buffer for you. Again, just to make that exception of if you're supposed to have any of those stacked address points or not. One of the things that we can also do is, instead of unstacking them and just spreading them within the outline, is make that exception that if they are sharing the same location, let's take a look at their other attributes that might be different, because that would then be flagged as like an exception to the rule, right? And this is basically part of one of the things that we can make a step on this particular workflow. Is this is where once you submit your data through that data validation rule and you try to see which ones you have to correct. You can go through the process of thinking about scenarios where you might have to make exceptions, especially if your city in particular does have a lot of those stacked address points in there. So it's definitely up to you, the discussion that needs to be had for how these should be better handled. And, you know, obviously with Rachel also, you know, how best to tackle that scenario or that specific scenario.
Yeah, use case. Yep.
Use case. Yeah. Thank you.
And I have some ideas about that too. So I think we put together like a best practices, and let's just look at some examples. All we have to do is go to where Todd lives. Todd's condo complex it's basically stacked address points, or there's different other places that you could go to, some business parks, or some other buildings that have that issue. You don't get it in really tall high rises usually because it's all one address, and then there's just unit numbers and things like that break it down. But there's lots of examples, and we just need to go through a few of those and then say, this is like the best practice. And then individual cities or other people could deviate from that if.
You muted yourself, Nick.
Yeah, we lost you. That was impressive.
Oh no, I muted myself when I ended.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no problem.
We were waiting for.
We're waiting for the conclusion sentence.
Yeah, Nick brought up my condominium complex where I live, and it's, like he said, it's a pretty good example. Primarily, the reason why I say that is because if we're talking about emergency services here, we have 3 stacks of addresses presently on my condominium complex, but there's 8 different buildings. So somebody responding to an emergency, once they get in here, there's got to be a way that address information would help them find the actual location.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment, like one of the things that, something to consider when you start thinking about those, where those address points have actually located, because I know, if I can just bring this up, because I already have it here, an example that I typically demo for you guys for LA County is something very similar to that. Since this is emergency services, you want to make sure that you're not moving the point away from where it might have been plotted, specifically because that is where the entrance of that building is. So that would be one of kind of the exceptions, or one of the things that we definitely should probably take into account. If I can look for an example here. So in this scenario right here, even if I zoom all the way in and it's definitely not inside that building, we can definitely create that rule to say, just bump me just so I'm actually inside that building, instead of actually just picking any center point. Yep.
I need your
Does that make sense?
I need my Bears tonight too. I need Nick Foles to score 30 fantasy points so I can beat my boyfriend.
I'm relying on Kirk Cousins to choke on the.
Oh, someone's not on mute.
I get that one.
Ended the conversation there.
It sounds like my fantasy. It went downhill.
All right, and then we have another question about automatically pulling the data from a city's REST endpoint. Yeah, that's definitely still a possibility. I know that that's one of the integrations that I want to have for a city that is on the more capable side, that doesn't want to have any additional overhead. If they do already publish their data, if they do entrust that the data is meeting various rules, I think that's something that we could very, very seriously consider for those jurisdictions that want that don't necessarily want to have the quality checks. And then, you know, the city is going to be the one displaying, you know, the accuracy and authority. The accuracy and potential, you know, caveats that we end up finding within there. Any other questions?
I think one of the things that's out there, which is going to be a challenge potentially, and I don't think it actually has to do with the validation components, but it's also dealing with stacked addresses aligned with the parcel IDs, right? That's kind of an interesting dilemma. So if we have 15 different stacked address points with 15 different parcels, how do you identify which address goes with which parcel? I mean, if we do have a unit number, that could be something that could help.
Yeah, if there's enough additional, we use not just spatial comparisons, but also attribution, a combination of those things to try to figure out. And if the system can't, figure it out, then it can at least give what we call as a proposal, which will, say, this is what the system is recommending, but then you can say yes or no. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then to be honest, we may have to do some field validation. So we may have to have a Survey 123 or a collector app that is tied to the address model too, where we go out in the field and we go and field validate some areas. Because we're going to have to do that with some shopping malls and office parks and things like that anyway. But that's where we'll do it. If the software can't get us there, which it's not going to do everything, it's great, then we need to go out in the field, and we just need a good tool that will get us that info, and then someone else can then validate what that tool what we brought in from that field.
Exactly.
Yeah. So would the cities be potentially interested in having, the CAMS program develop those types of surveys that you could then just deploy out, with an intern or with some other program that you have within your city to be able to do that data collection? And then it would be, submitted back to the county. Would you guys be interested in that? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just throwing out
ideally,
ideas.
the solution would be a very simple URL that you went to, so that the people in these different cities that are here and county departments wouldn't have to get a ton of training on how to use it. They're already out in the field. They're doing something related to an animal service thing, or they're doing something related to building and safety, and they're out there and they realize, hey, these addresses aren't matching what's in my system, right? And even if we didn't send them out, so we can send some people out, but we also want a tool where if you are already out and about, how do you flag something, potentially show what it should be, and then get it into the system.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad to see a bunch of yeses in the chat boxes.
There you go.
That is good feedback, because I believe one of the recommendations we're going to wind up with is development of some sort of an app that allows contribution on a point-by-point basis, just like what we're describing.
Cool.
Good discussion.
All righty. You ready to continue on there, Rachel? We can just a little bit more to get through.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Get back to the slideshow here. So we want to talk about what are the outcomes. Along with this great conversation is, it's not just Rachel asking you for something, it's also CAMS offering you useful outcomes. As the data comes into the CAMS database through that process we've just discussed, out of that comes locators that are regional locators that can be used with very local data, right? As local as is submitted. Open data site, the county's open data site to download not only your data, but your neighbors. And this is the one that I referenced earlier, where if you're a dispatch system administrator and you want to put in, particularly in a consolidated center, you want to put in more than one city's worth of data, instead of having to go to multiple sources. Now you can come to the CAMS open data and get that data. And that same data set then gets submitted to the state of California, to Cal OES, or to the any other sort of repository that may come up in the future that'll support, transportation and OES, right, for emergency management, for NG911, for a lot of other applications as well. And then, of course, it goes to support LA County or LA County internal uses there. For the departments like public health that have, responsibilities in the city, and whether it's in the city or not in the city, they have responsibilities and really need to do, proper contact tracing and things like that. They need a good address data set built, as well as, the unincorporated areas where, Nick's group is submitting information and Mark's group is adding addresses to it, but that all gets combined in the CAMS database and then put out to these outcomes. So any discussion, any questions about that? It's not just you being asked to submit data in a certain format but you get that iterative validation result to make your data better. But then in the end, out comes a regionalized address point layer that's useful for not only the cities, but also the county, and then lots of other, uses that are going to come out of it that you wouldn't even imagine or be able to describe at this point.
Yeah, I know, I've been, collecting stories is basically what I've been doing lately, of people actually using some of the data and some of our locators actually to build out their infrastructure. So Metro has actually integrated both our, address point data and the locators separately to build out their locator for the public transportation. So people can, search their address and then find the closest, bus stop, or find their way to their, wherever they need to go using public transit. We have school districts using the CAM data to identify whether a student falls within one school district jurisdiction or another. Or, they've even taken the data and started doing demographics of their, students, of where they're actually living, how far they're traveling, integrating it into all sorts of reporting and other mechanisms that I would have never considered starting out this project. But, it's really interesting on the trickle effect that this address data has on basically any avenue, anything that is going on. I know the state is very interested in it, not just for Next Gen 911, but also creating a statewide locator so that the various state departments could start using. Because right now, each of the divisions within agency is having to pay for either Google services or other services to be able to provide these locators to the staff to use for these public websites. And, that sort of, cascades back up and down. Having a statewide data set, having a statewide locator, having statewide, full on capabilities is really, will really help out everybody in the long run. I think that's all I had. Well, does anybody have any questions?
I think those are good examples too of how now the cities can integrate those locators to serve all those same departments in their enterprise in similar ways. So it's a really big benefit to get all of this put together and then put out.
Yeah, did anybody have any questions about the locators or the open data, or how or why or what mechanisms we're using to send the data to the state? No, okay. Well, you can find all that information in case you want to know on the CAMS website. I'm going to post it in the chat for everybody, just in case you don't have, or you haven't visited it in a while. And yeah, go ahead, Jeff, you could talk about this.
Yeah, so we just wanted to put in there a final pitch as we conclude for GIS Day, LA County GIS Day, a virtual event. And I don't know, Nick, you're organizing it or part of organizing it. So you can throw some details in here, but specifically both One Spatial and myself and Rachel will all be presenting together on Wednesday. No, well, back to back to back, but with a very similar and coordinated message between the three of us to help folks understand what this project is and how it's going to be useful to them. And so be sure and sign up for that. And I don't know, Nick, in general, if you want to talk about anything there.
I'll jump in for a minute before Nick gets on. Just that, you know, all three of our organizations are going to have tables. I have the opportunity to go and have you guys schedule a meeting with me one-on-one if you guys want to talk about anything specific, if you want to see anything, you want to get specific questions answered about attribute rules, about the infrastructure, about One Spatial, if you want to see the rule-making process or what rules are currently created. You know, I could take you through that in a meeting. I think I have it shooting out until the end of the year. So don't feel like it has to be this week. You know, we could pre-plan for something and go ahead and take it away, Nick.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so everybody, that's exactly right. So we have One Spatial, we have Datamark, we have our EGIS team and CAMS. We have an exhibit hall that I put the link in the chat. The exhibit hall has basically the link to the county departments that really are into GIS and use it a little bit more than others. There's some good examples there. I think those are good examples for cities as well, because it shows what the count from the various county departments are doing with GIS. And then you have the links to the vendor pages. So again, Datamark and One Spatial. So some of you I know from the LARIAC program. So there's links to different cities and sponsors that, or vendors that we've used with that as well. But here's the two other main pieces. There's a GIS Day game. It's an online treasure hunt of these 9 places in LA County. If you find that and you enter, you can win e-gift cards. So you can win a gift card. So it's always real money, either $25 or $50. And then we have a GIS Day Cake Contest, because you can't do GIS Day without cake, without GIS Day cake. For whatever reason, it's just something that's in the tradition. And it's not really a cake contest because you can't eat it. It's a cake decorating contest to me. And there'll be a session about making cakes, though. That's also on Wednesday at lunchtime. So take a look. I put a link to the schedule, but from there you get to everything else. The game opens up on Wednesday. And again, we'll be picking winners. And we have like 70 different prize. So 70 different people are going to win gift cards for the event. Thanks again to our sponsors. So should be good. There might be something in there for everybody. There's stuff on drones. There's stuff on strategic planning and GIS. But I think the exhibit hall is one of the key places just to see what other people are doing. If you get nothing else from GIS Day, or if you can't attend any of the sessions, take a look at the exhibit hall and what people are doing with GIS. In the county and with these sponsors. Cool, thank you.
Great, and then Rachel's going to put this URL in there. Just want to make sure everybody knows that the hub site is going to be the place to get all of the updates, not only on this project, but everything else that comes out of it. We'll be putting a recording of this session. I'll be handing that off to Rachel and she'll put it in the YouTube channel. And then we'll have these slides in a PDF format on the hub site as well. Anything else about the hub site, Rachel?
I am working through some issues with the hub site, some blank pages and some errors that I've been finding. So if you find any of those, let me know and I'll try to tackle them as soon as possible. I've been wanting to clean it up to make sure that it's easy for you guys to use, find the information that you need in some sort of logical fashion. So if you have any problems finding any of the information, or if you want to see more information about certain things, hit me up and I could go ahead and add those resources on there as well.
Great.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Does anybody have any last minute questions, comments? Please speak now.
Yeah, and you can definitely always email Rachel. If you have our addresses, you're certainly welcome to do that as well.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, this session sort of stimulated your mind about, you know, the potentials, what you're really gonna need to take into consideration about contributing the data, whether you want to start investigating the address data management solution, because I do want to put together a group to start working on some of the rules, at least getting the conceptual rules written out so that we could refine them and work through them a little bit closer together, not only on the address data management solution, but also on the one spatial side, to ensure that those are all aligned and moving forward appropriately. So, yay. Questions, comments? No? Okay. I think I'm good.
All righty. Well, thank you everybody for your time and attention today, and have a great day. And we'll be sending out the next both user group meeting and educational session in details probably in the next week or two. So be looking for that. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.